Okay, I will only publish this video if it actually feels really good, because what I'm about to say is really personal and really private, and I don't have to, put it out there on the internet for everybody to see. So I will only publish it if it actually feels good to say it. I've decided to, for a year, try celibacy. That means not get involved in any romantic relationships, not date, not see anyone, not flirt with anyone, not get physical with anyone, simply be celibate. I guess that's the term.
I want to talk about the fundamental obstacle that prevents men and women from understanding each other at the most basic level. Now, that woman is a famous vlogger, traveler, but it really illustrates a point, which I'll get to in a bit. Before I proceed, let me concede that there is, in fact, in many ways, a lot of overlap between men and women in terms of range of interest, although, of course, there are average differences, but for basically anything that men are interested in, you can find women are interested in it, and vice versa, to varying degrees, to varying percentages. And some men and some women like the same things. That's, of course, a nice thing, but all of that said, it all really comes back to this fundamental difference in the perception of lived reality based off of different reproductive imperatives. Now, the reason why I posted that is to illustrate just how alien that life is. So if you take an inkwell, for example, that seems insane. This woman is talking about her journey she's planning to be celibate as if it were some great challenge, an obstacle, and something to be overcome, a time to meditate or heal and come to terms with the world as it is and what have you. A lot of mumbo jumbo. And to her, it probably is. To her, who's not too bad looking, still reasonably young, probably has had a lot of experiences with men, that is a big deal, taking a year off. But to the inkwell, in the most extreme case, that is a joke. Now, of course, there's a distinction between forced celibacy and voluntary celibacy, hence the term inkwell. Inkwell is derived from the involuntary aspect of it. The gulf that lies between men and women as a consequence of this is probably insurmountable. I mean, sure, you can intellectually grasp things in the sense that you can understand why in her shoes this is a big deal. And in theory, somebody like her or somebody similar, especially a woman, could in theory understand why an inkwell has his issues and the things that he struggles with. But in actual practice, this never happens because most people interpret reality, understand reality at a very visceral level. They can look at stats, they can read publications and articles, but that's not the filter through which most people experience the world they're living in. And in this case, it's no exception. A little while back, I was talking to a young woman, a girl in her early 20s, and she was complaining about how she just doesn't have that much success in the dating market. And I normally avoid these types of conversations because they're really banal, but from a sociological perspective, I thought, here's an opportunity. And I asked her, do you think you're attractive? And she probably was boosting her attractiveness. She claimed she was an 8. We all know how that goes. It's probably an overestimation. But let's say she's actually a 6. I have no idea what she looks like. And I said, so you really have no luck. Are you telling me, unironically, that no men are interested in you or make offers? And they said, no, not at all. And then I dug down a little bit and dug more deeply. I said, look, you're literally saying no men ever approach you, ask you for your phone number, want to go out with you. And then she started to make small concessions. And then I started to ask some questions. Could it be that you actually do get a lot of attention from men? You're just not interested in the attention. And then she had to say, yeah, most of the guys who approach me, I'm not interested in. And I said, well, that still counts as interest, technically. If you have tons and tons of guys approaching you that want to hang out with you and do things with you, that doesn't count as interest? And I said, well, not really, because if I'm not interested, what's the point? I submit to you that's a very female perspective. from the male perspective, especially the inkwell perspective, it's about as alien as you can get. But men, viscerally, not intellectually, but viscerally, really struggle with this very concept if you think about it. The concept of, how can that be? I'm here starving. You're telling me that gruel and old potatoes, which may not taste the best and it's not exactly highly nutritious, that'll keep you alive. You're telling me that's not better than just starving to death? That's the perspective of the male. But from the female perspective, well, that literally is the case. All that attention this particular female was getting was irrelevant, not even worthy of being counted as attention. It's only the positive attention that counts. Now, reasonably, obviously, if a guy gets a lot of attention from girls that he's not interested in, he might come to that same conclusion, but it's unlikely. He's more likely to acknowledge that, yeah, I get some attention, but they're not really my types or whatever. There was another female in that chat that I conversed with who purported to know a great deal about inkwells, and it was every meme you could imagine in Normieville, that they are acolytes of Andrew Tate, that they're misogynists, that they're this and that, rather than the unfortunate reality that these guys are just very unlucky. They don't look very good, they're often not tall, they have various mental issues, and the cumulative effect of these disadvantages have put them in this position. Now, why did this second girl chime in? Well, probably because she was trying to sort of defend her fellow female in an act of solidarity. But it's also because that is an alien perspective to her. The idea that no one would be interested in you, that you have so many deficiencies that the world basically shuns you and avoids you at all costs, and when you do make your presence known, actively seeks to shoo you away, that's completely alien. So she couldn't even intellectually really grasp that, what that would be like if no people were interested in you, they didn't want to talk to you, you didn't appeal to anyone. Not that, yeah, most people might not find you attractive, but there are a select few. Basically, no one is into you. Totally alien thought to her. And so men struggle to, beyond the intellectual level, really internalize this idea that women really, really are that picky. And their entire perception of their reality excludes men that they have no interest in. It's basically, in a nutshell, the abundance mentality versus the non-abundance mentality. Now, this fundamental difficulty to understand each other based on this principle strikes deep. It is the number one reason why men and women cannot get along. Because on top of all this other stuff, a lot of people think, well, that's just about copulation and reproduction and mating and dating. No. Take the instance of the woman not acknowledging the men who are interested in her, pay attention to her, try to. Well, this often results in something like the apex fallacy. Most things that modern feminists claim, or women more broadly, that men are a privileged class as a group, that they enjoy certain benefits that women don't as a group. The conclusion they're drawn there, these women, is a conclusion based upon a certain filter that they put on reality. It is, in essence, the apex fallacy. The men they find interesting enough, worthy enough to pay attention to, are guys that are doing very well. Maybe they look really good, maybe they're wealthy, maybe they have a lot of status, political influence, whatever. Are these guys privileged in some sense? Sure. But the problem with that is, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a small percentage of men who actually occupy that position. Most men will never get there. Most men are invisible. Men are basically invisible. And that degree of quote-unquote privilege doesn't apply to them. But they will generally talk about men in this manner because it's how they perceive reality. It's not even intentional in most cases. These young women that I talked to on that day were not trying to pull the wool over me. They were not trying to deceive me. They honestly perceive reality that way. And likewise, men fundamentally cannot grasp at a visceral level that women are so picky that they would rather be completely alone and grow old with cats or reject all sorts of relationships because they find the thought of being together with a man that they don't completely fancy so repugnant, so absurd and bizarre and repulsive that they just wouldn't do that. So starvation versus abundance. So much can be derived from that. But again, other things about the world can too, such as how you perceive society on the whole. When I go outside and I see homeless people, I'm seeing the men there as well as the women. And I'll tell you, there are more men than women. And another issue that arises from this is a simple conflict of interest, because there's no incentive for either men or women to understand each other on this plane of existence, because their approach and their understanding of the world is just so completely different. I mean, sure, I had this conversation with these young women, and maybe for a moment they understood things as they actually are. But the reality is they probably forgot what I said an hour later, or maybe a day or two later at best, which is to say that what I said had absolutely zero impact on their perception of men with respect to themselves. And the same applies to men. So beyond a few individuals who can kind of integrate the quote-unquote intellectual understanding of things into the emotional or visceral level of things, it's just not going to happen. And this gentleman serves as the fulcrum of basically every misunderstanding between men and women, this key reproductive difference. Again and again and again, it resurfaces, but somehow you never manage to overcome it. Well, this is it. In the beginning, I showed you this clip of this traveler, wealthy vlogger, living her life, voluntarily celibate. And the inkwell weeps tears because to him, it's just absurd. This is fundamentally for him a fantasy world, something that doesn't exist. It can't exist. Not for him. And therein lies the rub. For this reason, men and women will never understand each other. And when I say that, I of course mean the macroscopic scale. This is all down to evolved differences. Yes, evolution is important. And when I say that, I'm talking about the macroscopic scale. I'm not talking about at the individual level. Yes, there can be occasional exceptions. But broadly, macroscopically, men and women will never understand each other. As always, thank you for tuning in. And special thanks, many special thanks indeed, to my patrons and the people who donate on PayPal. You guys are the best. You keep the channel alive and going. Without you, all would be dust and ash in the wasteland known as YouTube. As for everybody else, if you can like my video, comment, share, subscribe, do the usual YouTube jazz. Supposedly it helps. Be much appreciated. If I'm still alive, I'll check you out next time. Until then, may the gods watch over you. Bye-bye for now.
If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.